The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. Today's topic is What's Your Number? After our webinar on Pwin, or probability of winning, last year, many attendees asked for more insight into some metrics commonly used in business winning. So we've pulsed industry experts and will address several commonly used approaches to measure this effectiveness. For those who submitted questions in advance, thank you so much. We'll do our best to address many of those. During the webinar, you can type your questions into the Questions tab on your control panel. We will get to as many as we can, time permitting. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted for replay on our website by tomorrow, including PDF copies of the slides. I'm Mallory Price, Marketing and Event Coordinator here at Shipley, and I will moderate today's webinar. With me in today's webinar is Josh Ellers. Josh is a popular presenter at APMP events and other professional associations. He is founder of Patry, a software solution that guides you through opportunity qualification, probability of win, and other critical metrics. Also, Brad Douglas, Shipley's Executive Vice President of Global Strategy, is here and will facilitate much of the webinar. So I'll ask Brad to continue, and please put any questions or comments into that questions panel as we go. Brad, the time is yours.
Thank you, Mallory. Thank you, Josh, for participating with us and helping us shape this. And thanks to all of you for carving out a little time today to talk about this topic. I will start by sharing a promise I've made. I have a tendency to go over time on some of these webinars, and it's not really fair to those of you who have set aside a certain amount of time. So my commitment to Mallory and our team is I will end on time. So here we go. We'll make sure that happens. And again, thank you for your time. Just some on the topic here. What's your number? This is actually a trick question. And since it's almost Halloween, and I'm sure some of you are kind of into that, others aren't, some of your kids, grandkids might be, but what's your number? As I think you'll find out over the next little while today during this webinar, being successful at competing for work and winning work is a whole lot less about the number, and we'll talk about some of those numbers, than it is about the collaboration that gets us to a number. It's the process, it's the teaming, it's the sharing, the collaboration that goes on. And so a lot of the questions we got, as some of you registered, were all about, what's the benchmark for a Pwin in our industry, or what should be our win rate in this area? And we're going to talk about not just some percentages, but how getting there is so important. An actual number. Let's just take, and we'll talk about this, a probability of win percentage or number. It's a blood sample. It's like a blood sample. It's going to be a snapshot in time and tell us where we are, not necessarily where we're going or where we've been. So I wanted to just caveat that what's your number is great, but how you get there is so much more important. So the goal of today is to discuss some high-level metrics and measures that are commonly used in business development. And then very simply, what we'll cover are these items. Why do we have some metrics in business winning and competing for work? Why it's important that we have these measures all across the life cycle. Not just in the proposal phase, not just in the positioning or capture phase, but across the life cycle. And then we've integrated a lot of your questions into what we'll discuss already, but as you have additional questions, feel free to type those in. Mallory, feel free to interrupt us at any time and jump in with questions. This has been around for a long time, Peter Drucker's quote, but it's so true. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And you think of that in the context of trying to win work and generate revenue and execute on the contracts we win. If we can't measure it, it is difficult to manage because we just don't know where we're headed. I'm going to ask Josh. This data, this information comes from Josh and homework and research that he's done, to just talk a little bit about the bigger picture of why it's so important that we do have analytics and metrics when it comes to business winning. So Josh, you want to just talk us through how big of a deal this really is?
Hey, Brad, sorry, before Josh starts, we're still seeing the title slide. So
I'm sorry.
That's what we're supposed to be seeing or not.
Okay, let me get you current.
There we go.
There we go. So Josh, if you'd walk us through just how important this metrics tracking analytics is.
Absolutely. Great to be here, by the way. One thing I'd like to always share with our customers and prospects and with the market is what we do is vital to the companies we work for. And when we look at common regulated industries, this is not even holistic for all industries in all geographies, but within common regulated industries, public sector, engineering, supply chain, construction, etc., $11 trillion every year is generated through RFX procurement opportunities. And one thing that I've found, having been, as many of you know, on both the sales side and on the proposal side and on the capture front, it is costly when we lose opportunities. In fact, because of the added resources, the addition and use of SMEs, in addition to our proposal and capture teams, across the spectrum of the opportunity lifecycle, when we lose these opportunities, they are 5 to 7 times more expensive than other sales opportunities. In fact, they're 5 to 7 times more expensive than other traditional sales opportunities altogether. And Brad, to your question before we move forward, the question was, why is it important to understand not only the market, but leveraging data to make these pursuit decisions? One thing that I've found is everybody in our companies, every single person is at a different performance state. And I found that engaging with BD and salespeople, as I have done, either managing them or working with them, everybody's across the spectrum in terms of where they are on their quota attainment. And I found over time that some more desperation happened when there were pipeline and revenue needs to help dictate what was a good fit and what was not a good fit. So leveraging data to determine which opportunities we pursue cuts through those emotional decisions and some of the weight that is placed upon us, especially as proposal managers, to pursue something we may not be a good fit for. So I just want to kind of set the stage that this market is very large, and that number two, the problem of and the cost of losing these opportunities is about a $200 billion global problem every single year. And our purpose here is to give you some tips, some best practices to better determine which opportunities might be the best fit to pursue and which ones may be the ones you let alone and move on to a better fit opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah, if you know, numbers without context is just it's dangerous. You know, it's dangerous for us to have a target of a win rate, for example, of X percent when we put no context to that. And that's what we'll talk about, is making sure these numbers, these metrics, these measures actually mean something. So most of you who have joined us before, or you're familiar with Shipley or APMP or others, you're familiar with this concept of a business winning life cycle, not a proposal life cycle, but a life cycle of competing for work and trying to win business. You know, somewhere along the way, it's got to start here. We've got to segment the market, identify the market, and start to target the market. We've got to start looking for opportunities, identifying and qualifying them. We go through capture phase, whether formal, informal, short, or lengthy. We plan our proposal, our response, our message. We develop that message and proposal, we submit it, and we execute. So however we call that, whatever way we define that in our organizations, whether we like it or not, we're working through this. And whether it's defined or not, simple, complex, we're going through this cycle. So let's talk about numbers, metrics, measures really that are very common as we work through the goal of trying to compete and win. First, most of you probably are familiar with this term, probability of go, a PGO. All right, PGO is the government or our customer going to go forward with a solicitation of some sort? Are they going to actually buy something, acquire something? What's the probability? And this has to be determined really early as we go through our life cycle. You know, this is knowing our market, knowing what their budgets are, knowing what budgets have been approved. That all goes into this term commonly used in industry called the PGO, probability of the customer going forward. Pwin is our probability of winning, and we're going to actually spend quite a bit of time on that, so I won't go into that now. Some organizations will find a common term as POA. Okay, we might win the right to do business, but what's the probability of them actually awarding it once they've said you're the winner? Because there's all these negotiations that go on, there's trade-offs, there's things that happen. So this is another term or metric that we see in industry is POA, the probability that it will actually be awarded and we can start executing on it. Now this is one you may or may not use or be common, but a lot of us in our businesses, we go through that life cycle we just showed, and we have these decision gates. We have a leadership or management decision on whether to go forward or not. And one of those decisions is, should we be forming a campaign to go after XYZ opportunity? You know, a certain program with a certain agency, a certain project with a large global company. A campaign rate. How many of the opportunities that we bring forward actually get approved for us putting together an all-out campaign? So that would be a campaign rate, and it's something to keep an eye on. If we're putting together campaigns and our filter, our decision gate is way too loose, then we're wasting our money. We're wasting our marketing money on campaigns that never amount to anything. So just keeping track of decision gates like that. Capture rate, many of you are probably familiar. This is simple. It's pursuits awarded versus pursuits that we've qualified and gone forward with. Then this capture ratio. Okay, kind of a little difference here. The ratio is often in industry, and this can, we're saying this can vary by company. It's the percentage of the dollars that we've won compared to the total potential dollars we competed for. So it's what ratio of that revenue did we actually win? A capture ratio versus a rate. How many of the rate is how many qualified opportunities actually turned into pursuits. This is how many pursuits, the dollars, the money, the revenue. Win rate. We're going to talk about this later. It's tricky. It's an interesting metric. And let me just leave it at that for now. And then when we're looking at that life cycle that we showed earlier, this whole pipeline management, organizational measures, we're going to talk a little bit about some of those as far as what we should be looking at. And then many of your questions that came in, and I know many of you in the webinar are interested a little bit in some of the proposal metrics, proposal specific. So we're going to try and work our way through the life cycle so that it's not just a proposal centric webinar, but it actually walks through the entire business winning life cycle. So let's start here, okay? Let's assume now that we've defined our market, we know what our targets are, and now we want to start to long-term position our solutions, our company, our brand in this life cycle itself. So one thing we've got to do early, and I don't know if some of this might be a little bit not so familiar to some of you, and there's really no number here, but it is important that we monitor and try to measure our influence in the market and our influence to individual customers. And here you see we can start off, well, we're one of many potential solutions out there in a market or to a customer. Maybe we start talking to them, we maybe advance to be we're viewed as, oh, they're a potential vendor, a supplier. And then maybe we get a little more traction with the customer, with the market, and we become known as maybe some industry experts or solution experts, where we can, the market actually thinks we do have something. Here's where we want to get. And like I say, there's no number or measure here. This is more subtle. How do we get in this life cycle of winning business? How do we get to where we are viewed by the market and by the customer on individual pursuits? How do we get to be that trusted advisor? This is all part of monitoring our influence. And the only way we can do this is to be honest, to be out there asking questions, soliciting information and feedback from the market. We can't drink our own Kool-Aid here and believe we're trusted advisors when we're not. So this is really important early in the life cycle. And Josh, let me just pause here for a minute. Do you have any thoughts about this concept of making sure we become not just a commodity and one of many vendors, but we work toward being a trusted advisor? Any thoughts or experience there?
Yeah, you bet. I've been working in regulated markets, so typically tech companies focused on public sector. And especially in a market like that, and others who are on this call who work in parallel markets know that it is a market of credibility. And yes, I love the base of this pyramid where it kind of showcases you are one of many, and you kind of have to work your way into that trusted advisor position. I've found over the years that one way that you can do that really effectively is by leveraging the value propositions derived from existing customers of similar type. And as you can document all of those value propositions, the best practices, win criteria, etc., and you can really capture that really well in a business winning effort, you can become that trusted advisor over time. But you have to understand too that those, unless your company has done a really good job of documenting everything so it's really digestible for the prospects that you are looking to do business with, that will take some time. But I also believe that the time invested to get that content together, to build those relationships, to get that reputation out there is worth it in the long run. But I couldn't agree more with this, the tip of the spear, if you will, becoming that trusted advisor. But just know that if you sense your company is not there yet, maybe you're just kind of the one of many, or hey, you're just another vendor. I would really work to extract those value drivers that you have already experienced and perpetuated within your existing customer base, and try to take those and market them not only in your proposals but in everything you do, marketing and sales efforts. And then that will allow you over time, as you build the relationships, to become that trusted advisor.
Fantastic. Thank you, Josh. Couple of questions that have come in that I noticed. Someone asked, what is RFX? And sorry about that. RFX is a generic term, industry term used for any type of request for fill in the blank. Could be a request for information, a request for quote, a request for a proposal. So the X is just kind of a blank, fill in the blank. That's what RFX means. So sorry about that. And then someone said, did I hear correctly that you can win but may not actually get the award? Let me clarify that. And I may have confused some folks, but yes, we can get a letter or an email saying, congratulations, you're being awarded, but that congratulation leads to negotiations and it leads to discussions. And there are times when we actually think we've won, and when it comes down to actually negotiating and there's a term or a condition or a qualification that we can't meet, we forfeit, and we lose the work. So that's what I meant by that, is just because we are initially said we're awarded, it might be a multiple award contract, or it might be some other type of contract. In the negotiation, there's still room for us to either back out, we've seen that happen, or be disqualified for some reason going forward. So that's what we meant by that. So thanks for asking that. Let's keep going down this early phases of this life cycle, and I want to bust a myth right here. We're talking about influence, right? We're talking about early positioning and how we can track and monitor that. Well, here's a myth. A myth is that if we're competing for government work, that social marketing, social media, e-marketing, and all that is not worthwhile. Well, I want you to just read this for a minute. So how do we get to that trusted advisor and move up that pyramid from being just one of many? Let's not fall into the trap of believing that just because we're a large, complex, sophisticated government contractor or big IT company, that we don't have to use these tools. We do. We have to use every tool at our disposal to move the meter, to advance the chains, for anyone following football, and get to those key influencers and key decision makers. And you all know there's a lot of ways to try to do that, and we've just got to build those relationships. We've got to move our influence up the chain. So I'm just showing you quick samples here. And again, this won't apply to many of you, I understand. So we're going to jump through this really quick. But are we monitoring our analytics that tell us how visible we are out there? Okay, if our goal is to not only segment, but influence the market and influence the customer and build our reputation and credibility, we got to keep an eye on the metrics. This is just a simple snapshot. You can go into your LinkedIn company page if you have the rights to get into there. You click on analytics and you can tell who's going to look at your LinkedIn pages. Are they business people, human resource people, marketing types? Who are they? You can click on another tab under analytics and you can see the visitors. How have the visitors been flowing to our LinkedIn page? Over what period of time? How many of them are checking us out through their mobile device? How many through a desktop device? This is all free and easy. How do we influence the market? How do we get our name, our brand, our story, our reputation out there? These are some analytics and some metrics that are very simple. And then there's the whole website analytics, and we're not going to do a deep dive here. But again, this is just an example of a tracking, monitoring tool of website traffic. You know, here's an example of how many page views, what's the daily average, what's the highest day, lowest day. And it just monitors how many unique visitors did we have on each day versus people that have come back to the site. So we can't ignore this. As a business, as a company, as an organization, someone has to keep an eye on these numbers. How are we trending? Are we more visible to our target markets, or are we becoming less visible? Is our message current? Is it credible? Campaign tracking. Okay, Shipley does occasional webinars. Well, how many people get our invitations? How many open it? How many click into it and link into it? What's the open rate? These kind of metrics and measures and analytics are all very, very important to us. We've got to know the early trends in this life cycle as we long-term position our companies. The next step, and Josh, I'm going to ask you just to chime in here quickly. Program specific tracking. All right, we talked about those early phases of trying to position ourselves. Now we've got to use a variety of sources to start filling our pipeline. When we start talking about opportunity assessment, the first thing we've got to do is fill our pipeline, and it's got to be filled with the right stuff. You know, garbage in, garbage out. If we don't have a way to identify opportunities, quickly screen through those and put those in the pipeline, we're spending a lot of time, energy, and money where we shouldn't be. And so these are just some quick and dirty examples, you know, of some program tracking or identification tools that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, or that we could or should maybe check into. Josh, let me pause here. Any thoughts on this, making sure what we're putting in the pipeline as far as opportunities we need to qualify is quality? Any thoughts?
You bet. I've been a longtime customer of a lot of these products, and they're super useful for market analysis, for opportunity identification. Where everyone needs to be careful, since we're talking about efficiencies, is really have really tight filters on what is a pre-qualified opportunity that your company wants to see. Now, a lot of these solutions have great filtering. They have, you know, contract types and all sorts of different things that you can leverage as a kind of front-end filter. My recommendation is to build a robust filtration system with some of these solutions out on the market, whether you focus on federal or state and local or commercial or engineering, construction, what have you. There are solutions on the market that can aggregate and deliver those opportunities. One thing I've found, however, is you have to supplement your use of these types of solutions with your own go-to-market identification efforts. So for example, as I've used, you know, Deltek in the past, there's also something called GovSpend in addition to a number of others. You're going to get most of what's out there, but you won't capture everything from both a contract and a contact perspective. So just make sure you're not putting all your eggs in one of these baskets. I loved what Brad shared in terms of diversifying a little bit, but I would say number one, as I mentioned, tight filters when you leverage these solutions. And then number two, make sure your team or you yourself are doing what efforts you need to keep your pulse on the market in addition to leveraging these. I found if you combine those two things, you'll be in a really strong position to identify the right opportunities, apply some pre-filtration, if you will, before your company decides whether we go after or whether we pass on any of these opportunities identified.
Perfect. Great advice. Thank you. Thank you, Josh. So again, a variety of sources, fill the pipeline, keep track of what's going in, how many opportunities, and then at each filter point, and we're going to go through that, our weighted pipeline, how are we tracking? Let's keep going on this life cycle. All right, we've talked about some of the long-term positioning, trying to identify opportunities, get some of our message out there through social media, websites, LinkedIn, whatever it is, and tracking that and see if we're trending good there. But most of us aren't, probably, I don't think, on this webinar are the marketing and marketing analytic types. So let's go into this opportunity assessment. And one thing we need to think about, this may be, again, a new term for some, is this PGO. What's the likelihood that the customer will fund and execute the project? Where does the budget allocation reside within the customer organization? Is there truly an established and approved spend, a budget? Is this a recompete? What's the historical spend? Who's the incumbent? These are all questions we should be asking very early when we do that opportunity identification, however we do that, from whatever sources. These are questions as far as, well, if it's only 10% likely that the customer's ever really going to do this, should we be wasting our time? If we know because of press releases or interviews or trade shows or whatever, that the customer is like a 90% go on this is a high priority for them, then we make it a high priority. So pay attention to the customer's probability of releasing this solicitation, whatever that is. Okay, now so many of your questions that you asked when you registered were about probability of win, Pwin. And I just want to say at the outset, some of you are asking, what's the benchmark Pwin? What should we be aiming for as a probability of win? I can't answer that. I'm not sure anyone can answer that because it is completely variable. Every opportunity, every customer, there's different types of weighting and analytics and measures and metrics. It might be okay to pursue an opportunity with a 15% Pwin, probability of win, if it is super high strategic to us, or if it's super important that we respond and we bid because the customer wants us to, for whatever reason. So we've got to take opportunity by opportunity when we think probability of win. Here's generally what we mean. These are the four baseline elements of a Pwin, and some of you ask this. Do we know the customer well enough, and do they even know us? How well have we done in that early phase positioning? Who's competing? What's our competitive position compared to our competition? Are we one of many? Are we known? Are we favored? Define our own capabilities. What really can we deliver for this customer? Is there a way we can discriminate? Can we make ourselves not only different, but better or of more value? So discriminators. And finally, of course, value. What really is, and thank you, Josh, for bringing this up early, what really is our value proposition on this opportunity? So you can see why it's kind of impossible for myself, Josh, or anyone to say, this ought to be your target Pwin. Because without context, without knowing more about the customer, the opportunity, the market, how well we've positioned, without knowing these four things, we can't. We can't create an artificial Pwin target. So my advice, my recommendation is that Pwin and what we try to target is based on opportunity by opportunity. The key is, and we'll talk about this a little more here shortly, the key is that we're tracking it, that we're trending, that our probability of win is actually accelerating and gaining momentum over the course of the sales cycle, the capture cycle. If we're trending down and we're losing ground because we think now a competitor has a significant advantage, or we don't think we can actually deliver what we think they're going to ask for, those would trend us down, and we would have to rethink. If our Pwin trends down, we've got to ask ourselves and be honest, should we compete? We want it to trend up. We want to keep that Pwin, that probability of win, going up. Now, there's other questions that came about this. It can be monitored in a percentage. It can be monitored and measured and tracked in a number, 1 through 5. 5 is, yeah, we're on track. We're really looking good. We're strong. We're going to keep going. Whereas, 0 is stop it. Or it can be a percentage. That doesn't matter. However you decide to define your Pwin. So Josh has a tool, a solution that can really help in this regard. And so we're going to show you a couple of ways specifically. Some are simple and basic, some are a little more complex and sophisticated, on how you can maybe track and monitor your Pwin. In fact, in your handouts, and I hope you'll take time to do this, in your handouts, we've given you a very simple Excel workbook, and I'll walk you through that here in a minute. But it's a Pwin calculator, just in Excel. And it's, like I say, it's simple, it's basic. The example in there is we're working with someone who wants to buy a car. And so we'll walk through it in a minute. But so the tools to monitor and measure your probability of win can be complex or easy. And there's a lot of ways to automate some of this. So you're not doing day-to-day grueling number crunching. So Josh, would you take a minute and just walk through some of these key elements of probability of win?
Yeah, you bet. So a couple things to keep in mind as we talk through this. I loved Brad's comment about the dynamics of Pwin. We have to consider, number one, each company is different. And number two, humans are making the decision on the other side, right? That's always what we have to remember. And I think a lot of Shipley's training, talks through that. I think that's important to reinforce. Now, when we're talking specifically about opportunity insights, a couple things we do here at Patry specifically around that are, number one, we work to quantify the time and money cost of your pursuits. So if you have an opportunity that you'd like to go after, we can help you determine within the technology what the cost might be, what the cost might be to deliver, what the cost might be to actually pursue, and then provide you with a profitability metric, which is one of those things that Brad was talking about. Number two, and I may try, Brad, to share my screen here in a moment. Number two, we also have the ability here to identify metrics that are driving the opportunity to qualify better. So we've got a really nice spreadsheet here from Shipley that each of you has that allows you to kind of have a really basic calculator. But one thing we could do is take that 10 steps deeper. With our customers, and customers of ours focus all around many different markets and different geographies, but we can help you deliver based on historical data why you win and why you lose, number one, and then provide you with some metrics that would help you ascertain what you can actually go after in the future and actually create an opportunity qualification assessment or set of assessments that allow people to determine what is a good fit and what is not a good fit. So what you see here, and Brad, can you confirm that you're able to see my screen now?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, what you can see now, this is what we call the Patry Score dashboard. And a few things that drive, like I mentioned, the quantification of opportunity cost in addition to the qualification of the opportunity are as follows. When someone first engages with us, we'll take that opportunity cost assessment, we'll inject it into the platform, and every time a new opportunity comes about, we'll have some metrics from which we can, with historical data, with your analytics currently within your company, what makes the most sense to pursue. So what you'll see on the top here are opportunities by stage. These are customizable. You'll see opportunities by fit band, as we call them, which means of all of these, let's say 26 opportunities, where are we on the spectrum of fit? And we'll talk through that in a little greater detail. And then for the opportunities that you've pursued, what is the win rate? I loved what Brad talked about in terms of the win rate. You know, different companies that we work with do have different ways to check their win rate. It may be not just all the opportunities pursued, it might encompass others. What we're able to also do is for all of the opportunities that you are vetting with Patry, we can showcase the following. Number one, the value of opportunities over certain periods of time, so that these metrics can be segmented by months, quarters, years, however you'd like. In addition to that, the value of opportunities one, so this is a demo instance for a smaller customer. We can also aggregate the strengths and weaknesses for all of the opportunities in macro. And then finally, with those opportunity cost metrics, we can help quantify the time and money saved every time your team decides to pass on a low probability opportunity. That's vital because, as I mentioned before, some of these decisions are done in haste or with some stress. But if we can quantify and communicate the cost of pursuits within our companies, and that different pursuits cost different dollars, we can actually showcase how much time and money the BD team, the sales team, the proposal team, the capture team might be saving by not pursuing the opportunity. Now I want to dig in a little bit to some of the metrics that go into calculating what we call a Patry score, which is a very detailed view into Pwin. And what this includes is really based on the company needs. Brad made a really good point that there are some very strong baselines in terms of what dictates what we go after and what we don't. I think those 4 points are really key, right? We talked about relationship. One of the questions we ask in our assessment specifically takes that a step deeper. In addition to how strong is your relationship with the prospect or potential customer, we ask things like, how many times have you met with them over the last 3 months? Or things like that that get into the detail of the probability. So what we'll do is take those pillars and inject a little more detail, again, some historical data. And once your users or your team takes an assessment, what they'll see is the following. They'll see the estimated value of the opportunity, as I mentioned, the delivery cost and pursuit cost, which produces potential profitability metrics, which would not be bad, I guess, for this opportunity. And based on those detailed assessments, which by the way can be done by product or by geography or by market focus, whatever you want, we'll help build those out. We've got a data scientist on staff to help do that. You can actually see what the output is of all of that intel. In this case, for the opportunity here with the DoD, it's a pretty weak fit. And we want to know why, of course. So let's scroll down here. And this is something that Brad was showing a little bit earlier. So what we also provide are insights for the opportunity based on the categories of qualification. We can showcase where you're strong. Each of these, by the way, is customizable to your company. And we can also show where you're moderately strong and then where you're weak. And in those cases where, you know, the question was responded poorly, where we say something like, how many times have you met with your prospect prior to the release of this opportunity, and other things, you can see the spectrum of strength and weaknesses. And then further below, to make those decisions, Those review meetings are, yes, super important, but we've also provided a way to automate some of the early decision input, where if you have a score here, which is kind of a weak fit score, you have all the data points, the insights available, you can go within your team and petition feedback. Should we pursue? Should we pass? And then on the back end of the opportunity, should you pursue it, we have the ability to codify and document win-loss reasons. We can even generate win-loss reports for those debriefs, which are super important. We do that, and then we could feed the analytics with those debrief analytics as well. So I'll pause right there. Brad, any comments before we jump back into the presentation?
Oh, I'm seeing a couple of questions, Josh, and we'll deal with those. So, some people are joining by mobile, and so they want to know if they can get the handouts emailed to them. So, but thank you for walking through that. And so I hope this is creating and helping everyone with awareness that there are solutions out there to really help us with these business winning metrics at various levels. You know, so in a very simple form, some of us that are just starting down this path of trying to figure out what Pwin is, here's some of those basic things that obviously Josh's solution at Patry dives into way deeper. But how is, like Josh said, how's our relationship? Can we meet the budget requirements? Have we influenced the requirements at all and help shape them? What about an incumbent? So these are all questions that we need to dive into and answer to try to figure out our probability of win. And again, less about the number, more about the rigor and discipline of asking the questions and answering them without bias. You know, we've got to be completely honest with ourselves when we start considering, are we positioned to win? And so these win factors, just a couple things also to remember, generalities here. You've got to look at the past relationships, prior work, any biases with this particular customer. You've got to look current, where are we now? And you've got to look forward. Always, always, always. You notice this little subtitle, from a customer perspective. This isn't important what Pwin we think we are. It's what's our possibility of winning with the customer. Past, present, and future considerations all have to be part of that equation. And that's what Josh's solution dives into. You know, what is our past relationship? What are we currently positioned for? And what's our solution going forward? So again, this is from Josh's scorecard. You know, things that we need to, Pwin factors, we call them, right? Probability win factors that we need to be able to answer. And in the Patry solution, you can order these in order of importance and give them a priority, a weighting. And then it's very easy to move these up or down in, again, the Patry solution. So Josh, thanks so much for taking time to walk us through this, because this is new. This is new to a lot of folks. This is the simple Excel Pwin calculator that we've provided in the handouts. There's two tabs on this Excel page. There's one at the bottom here that says, what are your Pwin parameters? Those are examples that Josh and I just walked you through. And then the actually calculator part like this. So let me click into this simple Excel. All right, and this is so simple compared to what Josh showed. But let's say, for example, that Miss Wilson is going to buy a Kia Sportage. That's what, you know, she's the customer. That's what she's after. Well, okay, her win factors, in order for me to sell her a car, she's told me she cares about safety, capacity and cargo space, the color and the style, and the exterior lighting, internal technology and dash, and of course, cost and financing. Okay, win factors, I've got those. I enter those into this Excel tool. Then I decide what are 4 statements that represent my best positioning here, 4 points, not so good, not so good, not so good. So you create in real life, real opportunities, these win factors. Now, these are more realistic to us. You'll relate to these. What about incumbency? What about experience? What about past performance? What about contract risk, contract size, our competitor rating, and other criteria? So this is on the tab when parameters. Then you go into the calculator. We go back to the car example. We go down to safety. We exceed her safety expectations in all categories. Great. Okay, we do. So we're going to give ourselves that, and it's going to tabulate and give us points. We go into capacity and cargo space. We lack interior capacity. It's going to give us a lower number. And this will ultimately calculate into a figure. And in this tool we're giving you as just a handout, very simple. It will rank you from, the strong loss, don't go for it, to a strong Pwin 4 once you work through it. Okay, simple Excel. We don't want to dwell on the tool. Josh showed you this. Thank you. You come up with a score. In this case, he's showing here on the screen. This is an opportunity, and it's a weak fit. Based on all those questions we've asked, all those answers we've given, it's a weak fit opportunity. Should we go or no go? Should we spend money or not? Bottom line on probability of win, we want to progress. We want over time a sales opportunity, capture pursuit opportunity to advance, not decline. And so that's why we track. That's why we have these metrics. Okay, I'd like to move us for a few minutes now before we wrap up. There's opportunity metrics that Josh and I have spent most of our time on. A little bit about positioning, a little bit about where we are in the front end of deals, and then opportunity qualifications. What about the whole business winning organization? So these are some things to consider. What are the opportunity costs? Activity tracking. How do we manage our pipeline? Pipeline progression. Our revenue compared to our target. What's the percentage? Trends and KPIs, capture ratio and win rate. These are all organizational metrics we need to keep track of. And as Josh has explained, and I'm just going to summarize here, the opportunity cost for us pursuing the wrong type of work with a low probability of win is tremendous. We're wasting resources on bidding on things we shouldn't be, when we should be spending time on higher Pwin opportunities. So, examples. A lot of us probably have CRM systems. We have a pipeline system where we can track things like this, activity. I want to know how many deals we have in the system where there hasn't been any activity for 30 days. That's a problem, for example. That's one criteria. So there's all kinds of metrics we can track depending on the system that we're using. This will help us monitor organizationally. Right in Teams or some other systems, you can track your weighted pipeline. How many opportunities are in the open pipeline, the weighted pipeline? Greater than 75% Pwin. How many do we have? What revenue do we have? Booked sales, total revenue, metrics. These are organizational metrics that help our business winning team know where we're trending. How are we going? How are we doing? So out of our total pipeline of this case, 7.16 million, we've got 3.5 million, almost 50%, with a 75% chance of closing, of being awarded. Okay, is that good in our organization or not so good? It depends. It depends. So pipeline progression, leading from, just an opportunity was identified all the way through contract negotiation. It's the trend we care about. It's that pipeline. Are we advancing enough opportunities through our pipeline? Now, whatever that pipeline management tool is, there's too many of them out there for us to get very specific, but it's that pipeline and how we weight that pipeline that really matters. Okay, another obvious metric, if we're in a business winning leadership role, we're tracking revenue, opportunities, Pwin trends by contributor, individual contributor. Are we do we have one person or one team generating most of the revenue? That might be a problem. Tracking opportunities, revenue by contributor. And then of course, total revenue, we're always tracking that in our pipeline and in our measures. Actual versus target revenue. These are our contributors. These are the targets. How are we doing against our target revenue goals? So this is pretty obvious. This is a way to monitor and measure not just revenue, but our KPIs. How are we doing? And you can see some of the Power BI and the team's metrics that we can produce through our systems. Okay, let's get to a lot of your questions. Win rate. This is such a fuzzy metric. And actually, one of your questions right now in the question box that came in early, thank you for this, is, I'm paraphrasing now, but something like, I see organizations claiming an 80 to 90% win rate. How do you do that? Well, it all depends on how you define it. You know what? I would be scared to death if someone told me they had a 90% win rate, because I'd be saying, wow, how much are you leaving on the table? How much more opportunity is out there that you should be bidding on that you're not, because you're trying to maintain that 90% win rate? So things to consider. Make sure a win rate definition is clear. Does it include that calculation, bids that are canceled by the customer? What if we win a multiple award contract? Is that a win? What if we don't win any follow-on work? Then what? If we win, but we lose in the negotiation, is it a win? It's a good proposal. We had a good solution. We couldn't deliver. What about a protest? We won, now it's protested, now we lose. Did that count as a win? Should we measure incumbent contracts and awards different than non-incumbent? Where were the new person bidding? What about solicited and unsolicited? You see where I'm going with this. Win rates are meaningless unless there is well-defined, agreed upon context. Be careful throwing win rates around there. Be careful that you need to understand the context around a win rate. Now, many of your questions were around proposal development metrics. This is so unique to each individual, but these are some things you can try to measure. What really did it cost us to produce this proposal? This takes a lot of work. This takes a lot of honesty, because we've got to talk about hard costs, labor, production, but what about all those hidden costs and soft costs that aren't so obvious? We could try to measure cost per page. If we submitted a 25-page proposal and we think we spent $80,000 on it, cost per page, keep track of it, see how we're doing. And they're not all going to be the same, I promise you. How many pages per day or hour could a proofreader, editor, or someone asked to revise a red team legitimately do in an hour, in a day? Start tracking it. It'll be different for every single one of your companies. Could we track What percentage of the content in our proposals is reuse material, so it saved us time, an efficiency metric. It's going to be different for every proposal, and we need to be careful we don't overuse reuse material, but you get the point. These are all, this is a little list of things you can start tracking as far as your proposal development costs. The time and cost per graphic. Boy, how much, if we have a graphic designer, what did he or she, you know, did it take him a day to produce that chart, that table, that image, that graphic, that infographic? What percentage of graphics are reuse? Efficiency measures. Okay, last thing we'll cover. Proposal quality factors. Can we measure them? Yes, we can. One of the handouts for you, I think it's a very nice tool, something you can reference. It's these 7 pillars of quality proposals. And yes, you can, with that little simple document, it's a good starting point. You can actually attach a score. Yes, it's somewhat subjective. You can attach a number to each one of these pillars. When you go back and you look at your proposals, some of them you've done, you can actually create a notional score. How did we do on compliance? These are the pillars. Were we responsive to the unspoken, the needs, the issues? What about competitive focus? Did that show up in our proposal? How about our win strategy? Crystal clear? Value proposition? Is it there? What about the quality of our writing? Do we have run-on sentences? Are we using too much jargon, abbreviations? The quality of the graphics and visuals, and finally, page and document design. These are your 7 pillars you ought to start looking at and monitoring and measuring. And yes, you can score it. You can train your own team on how to. Here you see how you could showcase the results. Okay, this gray area here you see the 7 pillars around the outside. The gray shaded area, industry benchmarks, and the orange is a proposal that we just scored. We just assessed. And you can see where we fell short of industry standard. Our worst part on this proposal was right here, competitive focus. We're at a 2.7 on the scale, and industry says we should be way out here. We got to be way more competitively focused in our proposals. Where did we score the best? Well, we were compliant. Good job. We met the criteria on compliance for the most part. The quality of the writing was pretty good as well. So just a little simple tool, a starting point for you to monitor, measure, and gauge the quality of your proposals. Okay, we will make this available on our website. The actual audio and video will be up there for replay. I'm violating my promise here. Sorry, Josh and Mallory, I've gone over by 3 minutes. Next time, here's just a quick summary. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. We've got to determine what we should be measuring, look at measures across the whole life cycle, leverage tracking tools, look at solutions, demo those, practice those, get familiar with what's out there, hold our teams accountable to these metrics, and then be flexible, nimble, and adjust whenever we can. Remember, it's not the number that matters, it's getting there, the collaboration, the discipline that we're after. So with that, we'll close. Thank you so much for joining. We will continue to do these webinars, and thank you all for your time and participation, your questions, your input. Have a great rest of your week and weekend to all of you. Josh, Mallory, thank you so much. Appreciate you your input today.
Thank you.
Thank you.